Hey everybody, today we're going to be troubleshooting valve train noise, possible adjustment issues on the Shovelhead engine, trying to find out what the culprit is. This has been affecting the bike over 2 rebuilds. Could it be adjustment? Could it be parts failure? Some people are rolling with straight weight oil. There's an argument to be made that by 1979 Harley-Davidson was using multi-weight oil in their bikes. Taking these things into consideration, have we changed the way that we measure these things? These tools here, have these tools changed? Should we even be using these tools to do this? Should we be using the wet method, the dry method? I've taken apart and rebuilt this entire bike, and when it comes to full temperature, I still hear excessive valve noise. It tells me that I'm still doing something wrong when I adjust these valves. Enough yapping though, let's get started. We're going to take out these spark plugs so we can turn the engine easier, blow a little air into this before we do so. You live down south, you do this before it turns into a mud dauber nest. We'll be doing this on the rear cylinder because there's a better angle for the camera. So I'm going to pop these retaining clips off. Then we'll support the pushrod tubes with a clothespin. We'll have the exhaust open and then close as the intake opens. Now the intake closes and now both valves are closed. I'll be using this measuring tool regularly as our control as I place it in. We can see from overhead where it rests on the ledge of the lifter. And now we'll look from the side and we can see this tells me, most importantly, that these have not shifted since I've set them. Gives an understanding that it's set closer to the bottom but roughly within the 2 bars of this tool. I'll point out always an important safety distinction on this job. I could turn both push rods when not resting on the valves. With that in mind, the first task is just to remove the exhaust push rod, nothing more. I'm just going to pull this lifter right out of here. I've cleaned it, but I haven't removed the oil as of yet because I just want to do a general inspection, make sure the lifter itself is okay. I push down on it, have it push back against my finger. If it didn't do that, I would be concerned about it, but it appears to be operating correctly. In this state, of course, I can never squeeze it further than this with my finger. We could see where the tool is. Now I push in the valve with a small hex key. I'm no longer working against the hydraulics. I could squeeze it all the way down. Measuring against with the tool, we can see it comes just about to where the mark is, and there's more room for that spring to compress. So I'll drop the exhaust lifter back in, and we'll turn our attention to the intake. Now this push rod is removed. The intake is actually the one that's going to be done first. Pull this one out. Do our regular cleaning and inspection of the lifter, make sure it's operating correctly. Push in the valve, then try it out. Then the entire thing will be cleaned out. And then it will be installed back in the bike. Like so. We should be able to just push both of them nice and easy. Just like this. They're empty, dry. So now we begin. The intake push rod will be reinstalled. And I'm going to quickly draw out that first ½ centimeter of slack till it just touches the lifter. Now I'm checking with an up and down motion. I could feel that there's still gap. I'm going 1 flat at a time, feeling that up and down motion decrease until that exact moment that there's no more deflection. Just a little more. I do it again, and then at one point it's just going to stop. It'll be perfect, and that's my 0 point where I'm going to start. Right there, there it is. This is our first flat. The measuring tool at 0 just for reference, really low. And have scribed with a file a small mark in this flat to denote 1 turn. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it 4 turns in, just because some instructions do call for 4 turns in from the top. But we're just going to have a look and see what that looks like. The thread's got a little tight here, so I used a wrench to get it to the final position. 4 turns. If you look at my measuring tool here, it seems to me that the measuring tool is calibrated for 4 turns. Now I'm going to carefully turn this all the way to full seat just to find out how many turns it is. We already got 4 under our belt. 5. 6. It's 7 turns. After the 7th turn, I did it by feel. I turned it 1 more time until the push rod stopped turning. I knew I was pushing up against the valve, and that turned into 8 turns. So my tape dispenser math shows if I'm calibrated for 4 turns down, I'm calibrated for 4 turns up, if it's 8 turns. But the book says I should be 1.5 from the bottom, which really means I should be 6.5 turns from the top, so my measuring tool can't possibly be correct. So fully from the bottom, I'm going to get it started here. I'm turning 1 full rotation inward. So I'm back at my mark. There it is. And now I'm going to turn it 3 flats inward. So now we're at 1.5 turns inward. We could see the measuring tool comparing to as I found the bike on the top left. The exhaust push rod is now reinserted. I'll go through the exercise again where I take up the slack. Again, scribing one of the flats. Not testing the 4 turns from the top method this time, going all the way to the bottom of the lifter. Right here, I can feel it bind up. I know I'm on the valve. I've gone just a bit too far. We're going to dial it back a bit. Came back 1 flat, and the push rod moves again. We know we're at 0. So now I'll turn it 9 flats, or 1.5 turns, out from the bottom. Spin the locking nut up. Notice that this exhaust push rod is set up a bit longer than the intake. Tighten it down with 3 hands and a 7/16 for each one. And I hope the exhaust is done. I start on the front one. I'm not going to repeat everything I just did. I just want to go over some things, some specific information, like the length of the push rod for the exhaust, just over 9 inches as measured. And I wanted to capture the depth of the intake. The intake push rod, the same exact size as the exhaust. This is the entire length of the adjuster. I do have the locking nut on the bottom of it. And I did measure 25 millimeters, but I did forget that flange on the end of the locking nuts was probably about 27. This isn't very scientific, but I'm trying to determine where the threads end, how deep it is, to see how much of that thread actually goes in before it's adjusted so long that you're actually not using all the thread. And I came up with this value that I'm going to use here. We're going to put it back in now. I've got it in and it's fully adjusted, and I counted the threads before and after I put it in the bike, and I found that if it was turned out another 2 turns outward, it would no longer be using all the threads in the push rod. It makes me wonder if they should have had a longer push rod for the front exhaust valve. But we're going to close this up now, and we're going to see how the bike runs. Incidentally, the publication I found for 79.5 shows 1.5 turns from the bottom. Everything's buttoned up, and I'm doing a slow test. We're going to roll the engine a couple times, make sure everything's sounding mechanically good, no interference. And we're in the clear. We're good to put the spark plugs back in now. Had my old-fashioned stethoscope on standby, and I recorded this so you could hear how weird the engine sounds before the lifters pump up. And I'm going through and I'm listening with the stethoscope, and there is no noise on any of the valves. They all sound, from what I could hear, pretty much the same as I expected, because I don't hear anything right now. I'm going to go for a ride and heat this thing up. No noise yet at my first traffic light. Driving a bit later now, and I do hear the audible noise, and I'm checking the front, and I do not hear it from the front, but I do hear it from the back. I'm checking now, just outside the camera. Time to get it home. Trying to set up my tripod as quick as possible to make a movie of me capturing this noise in the rear rocker box. And while I could hear the noise is only coming from the rear, I can't discern which valve it is, and I have no way of playing this into the video. I'm going to have to break out a different tool for this job. So I'm going to break out the electronic stethoscope, which will allow me to record what I hear and play it into the computer. First, I'm going to use it the conventional way with headphones, get a baseline. I've recorded a mark here for the volume. I'm just going to check out all 4 of them. And I'll tell you, the bike has just turned on. It's only been warming up for a couple minutes. There's no noise on any of the valves right now. I'm going to repeat this now into my digital recorder. All 4 of them, one at a time. I'm recording the timestamps for later use. That's as good as I could do with filtering for demonstration. There's a lot of stuff going on in this motorcycle. On the road at my first traffic light, no noise as usual. Second traffic light got noise. It was very hard to filter this out from all the background noise. I used several filters, several high and low pass combinations. I was able to determine, though, that it's only the back, and it appears to be only one lifter. So this is the best I could get with this device. I could hear it fine, but recordings aren't so good. From what I heard, it was conclusive, though, so I picked up a lifter from S&S, and here it is, 1274279. And I just removed the rear exhaust, and it wasn't going to go far on the off chance that I was wrong, but here's that new lifter. And I was concerned that the inner diameter of the new one on the right was larger, but it was just fine, cleaned up and installed. Same procedure. Conduct my before baseline when the engine is cold and everything is nice and quiet. I'm checking the bike out at about 160 degrees when I should hear an audible noise, and I do not hear any noise whatsoever audibly, but I'm going to hook up a device so I can listen to it. Not with my ears, but from here I'm trying to listen. Of course, I'm comparing the sound against the 2 front ones that made no noise ever, and I got nothing. So this is a good sign. I'm going to take it back out on the road. We're going to heat it up to full temperature. 180 degrees on a thermometer. I still cannot hear audibly any noise as I sit next to the bike. It should sound like a drum right now. In comparison here, see, this is what it used to sound like. But I feel like there's a hint of something in the remaining rear lifter, so I'm going to get another lifter. And the rear lifter was swapped using another S&S lifter in the same manner. Listening to everything after a long ride, not a sound from any of the lifters, and we're at full temperature. Mission accomplished, going over a couple of things. The adjusting tool that I was using was no good for these lifters, probably no good at all and shouldn't have been used. Bad settings. Using measurements from 4 from the top was not advisable. Should have been using 1.5 from the bottom, even if I wasn't using the tool. And at the end of the day, the lifters themselves were failing and needed to be replaced. And that concludes this video on valvetrain noise troubleshooting and valve adjustment. Hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below. Helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. If another video comes out in the series, a link will be posted in the top right. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?